Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. How's Eddie Frederick?
So glad you can join us. The Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association, TTMA, was addressed by Grenada's Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell. This story takes the lead in today's edition of Caribbean Perspective for Friday, 18th November 2022. Details when we return.
Hubbard's Multi-Department Mount Gay and Hubbard's Tire Bay, located at the Building Supplies Compound in Grenada, are reminding the motoring public that another round for licensing and inspection has begun. Just arrived on new shipments of quality furrowed and torque tires to fit all makes and models of vehicles at competitive pricing. Shop early to avoid the hassle of long lines. WhatsApp them on 473-405-5482. Hubbard's, quality service, affordable prices.
Welcome back. Grenada's Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell, delivering the feature address at the TTMA's award function on Tuesday, laments poor intra-regional travel and calls for the full implementation of the CSME. Urvashi Rupnarayan of TV6 News filed this story.
Grenada Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell laments the lack of intra-regional connectivity.
Getting to Trinidad required me to get to Miami and then fly back to Trinidad. That is how difficult it is to travel within the region. And since we are talking trade, if we can't even move people, then it's obvious that we can't trade. So that's not part of the script. But I want to highlight it because it's absolutely critical. And since becoming Prime Minister, I've talked about it. I feel the pain of our people because I literally can only travel within the region by asking the folks at the RSS to fly me in and out of Trinidad, Barbados, Montserrat, St. Kitts.
Delivering the feature address at the TNT Manufacturers Association's award function on Tuesday, he also lobbies for the Caribbean single market and economy to fulfill its mandate.
The full implementation of the CARICOM single market and economy has never been more urgent and deserves our firm commitment as member states. For Grenada's part, we have identified 5 key areas that we believe will transform our approach to trade.
Dickon says territory to territory, the TNT Grenada relationship is mutually beneficial.
In 2019, Grenada exported $5 million worth US of goods to Trinidad and Tobago. And at the same time, it imported $248 million US worth of goods from Trinidad and Tobago. And so, undoubtedly, the trade is robust in favor of Trinidad and Tobago.
Still, there is some room for more Grenada imports on local shelves, as prefaced by Trade Minister Paula Gopi-Schoon.
When I came into the Ministry of Trade and Industry, one of the things that we had to deal with quoted every year was the issue of honey. And I'm sure most of you know that. But I can tell you for the first time, I'm proudly going to quoted with good news about allowing the transshipment of honey and working our way towards the imports of honey as well from the rest of the region. That's good news.
And I'm happy that I can report when I get back to Grenada to my colleague, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade, of the likelihood, probability, that we would have significant movement as it relates to the honey issue. And I did tease Tricia to say when I got in the airport this morning, I asked for some tea with a little honey, and there was no honey available.
TTMA President Tricia Kusal says many matters need to be addressed.
Crime in Trinidad and Tobago is too much for an uncontained burden to business. Congestion and long delays at the ports of the country also continue to put an unwarranted level of stress on the business community, coupled with outstanding VAT refunds. The seemingly unbalanced IR climate in our country needs to be addressed.
The TTMA will be taking a trade mission to Grenada in early 2023. Urvashi Rupnarayan, TV6 News.
In other news, Bitcoin Cash pioneer encouraged by response to the conference in St. Kitts. Andre Huey of SKN Newsline reports.
Roger Ver, the chief pioneer of Bitcoin Cash adoption around the world, said he believes Saturday's electronic cash conference held at the Royal St. Kitts Hotel will promote the use of Bitcoin Cash in St. Kitts and Nevis and the wider Caribbean. He told SK Newsline after the conference that it is now up to the politicians to make Bitcoin Cash legal tender to provide more payment options to consumers.
What an amazing day here in the lovely island of St. Kitts. We heard not from one, but from two different jurisdictions about making Bitcoin Cash legal tender. We heard about entrepreneurs and business people who love the fact that they can use it in their businesses and don't have to deal with the banks. They don't have to wait in line at Western Union. It's faster, cheaper, more reliable than the other options they have. And that's why we're seeing this spontaneous, natural adoption of it by businesses and individuals alike, because it works so incredibly well here in the Caribbean, spreading from St. Kitts to St. Martin to Antigua to Dominica and on and on and on. I think this conference really helped bring a bunch of people together and make them even more excited about Bitcoin Cash spreading here in the Caribbean. I think next we have to wait for the politicians to do their job and actually pass the legislation to officially make Bitcoin Cash legal tender here in St. Kitts. Not because it's being forced on anybody, but because people are naturally using it already anyhow, and they'll just be acknowledging what has already happened here in St. Kitts and in St. Martin and in Antigua and in more and more places across the Caribbean and the world. It seemed pretty clear that that's their intent, and so we'll see if they get over the finish line and how quickly they do. But like most politicians, I believe it once it happens.
At the conference on Saturday, Prime Minister and Minister of Finance Dr. Terence Drew said that the government will be exploring the option of making Bitcoin Cash legal tender by March 2023, once all the necessary safeguards are guaranteed. Mr. Ver is hopeful this will be achieved and said efforts are being made to calm the fears of regulators.
Actually, just earlier today, I agreed to have a meeting coming soon with the central bank, and I'll help guide them to help better understand how useful Bitcoin Cash is, and I think they'll really be excited about once they fully understand its abilities. I invite the regulators to try sending a wire transfer and then try sending Bitcoin Cash, and if they're still pushing against Bitcoin Cash, it's because they're shareholders in the bank.
Meanwhile, Mr. Ver believes the growing use of Bitcoin Cash in St. Kitts and Nevis is encouraging.
So I was one of my favorite restaurants here in St. Kitts is Shawarma King, and I was there the other day, and I was paid with Bitcoin Cash, of course, and I asked the girl, how often do people come here and pay with Bitcoin Cash? And she said, 5, 6, 7 times a day. So I think that's real usage, and I don't go there 5 or 6, 7 times a day. I go there a couple times a week. So there's clearly, and actually I have another good story. There's a Russian gentleman living here in St. Kitts. He was born Russian, that's not his fault, but now because of the world situation, all of his bank accounts, all of his credit cards, everything's been cut off, except for Bitcoin Cash, because it can't be cut off. And now he's living his entire life here in St. Kitts using Bitcoin Cash to pay for everything.
Bitcoin Cash is a cryptocurrency that is a fork of Bitcoin, created in 2017. I'm Andre Huey for SKN Newsline.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick.
Jamaica's Prime Minister Andrew Holness has painted a potentially bleak picture of Jamaica's fight against modern gangs, which he says are evolving to the point that they are attempting to influence the policy decisions of the state. Joel Crossgill of CVM News has more.
Having moments before announced a new state of public emergency, spanning several parishes, Prime Minister Andrew Holness admitted that organized criminals have corrupted the state.
When we start to see criminal organizations operating in that way, then they are beginning to transition out of being criminal operatives to trying to influence government policy and outcome. They are corrupting the state. We cannot sit by and do nothing. We wish the opposition would see this, because our constitution requires that they participate. We would really hope that they support it. But let it not be said that the government did not act.
While calling on the support of the opposition, the Prime Minister also called for national introspection as it relates to the seeming escalation of aggressive behavior that has gripped portions of society.
As a people, we have to recognize that the murder rate that we have, the level of violence that we have, the level of public disorder that we have, the level of trying to challenge the state, it is unusual, it is abnormal, and it is disruptive.
Ominously, The Prime Minister and Minister of Defence outlined two possible outcomes of Jamaica's efforts to combat sophisticated transnational criminal organizations.
We have seen states where this has reached a point where either the state is on the brink of collapse or they have had to take extreme actions. We are trying to avoid that at all costs.
Joel Crosskill, CVM Live.
Despite initial concerns about limited resources impacting the zones of special operations, the ZOZO's extensions and spread, the Prime Minister of Jamaica and members of the security forces sought to allay fears that the state of emergency will thinly spread across meager resources. Nika Lewis of CVM Live provides some details.
Not enough police for a zone of special operations, but enough to man several parishes under states of public emergency. How come? Police Commissioner Major General Anthony Anderson told the CVM Live while the boots are needed to maintain peace in a ZOSO, an SOE goes further in removing the targets to allow greater intelligence gathering and doesn't require as much resources in terms of personnel.
You'll generally find that the guys who are doing the violence within the community, sometimes they do it outside of the community as well. When you have a zone in place, you'll see violence drop in the community, but they may still be there. We see that when we do surveys of communities, and the fear still remains in the community, even though the violence is not taking place, because the fear is associated with those people being there and not necessarily with the actual shooting that may be taking place.
His response was bolstered by an explanation from the Prime Minister, who says, unlike decades prior where there was a disinvestment in the security forces, today there is continued resourcing and recruitment of security personnel.
So for the first time in a long time, our security forces numbers are growing. The JDF numbers have grown significantly through the Jamaica National Service Corps program. And the Commissioner of Police has implemented a new strategy to grow the force. When I speak to the opposition parliamentarians who express reservations, reluctance on the use of the SOEs, they point to more police. We need more police on the ground. We need more boots on the ground to do the static and dynamic operation to deter the criminals. But where are they going to come from? The process of training is not an overnight process.
He also says, based on the nature of the crime beast, the best approach was advised as being the SOPEs, which allows the security forces heightened probity. He says their deployment have been carefully considered to ensure the forces will not be thinly stretched. They were responding to questions I posed at Tuesday's media briefing, where the SOPE declaration was made. Nika Lewis, CVM Law.
An attorney at law in Jamaica has been charged with fraud. He becomes the second one within a few days to be identified for some measure of disciplinary action, the other being in Grenada.
Attorney at law Maurice McCurdy has been charged with fraudulent conversion over the alleged non-payment of more than Jamaican $100 million in the sale of a commercial property for a client in St. James. He was charged by the fraud squad on Monday and granted station bail in the sum of Jamaican $2 million, the police say. He is scheduled to make his first court appearance on January 19, 2023. The allegation surrounds the sale of a property for US $5.5 million. The client complained that after the sale went through earlier this year, a sum of more than $800 remained outstanding, the police says. A report was then made to law enforcement, resulting in the investigation. McCurdy is a St. James-based lawyer.
Meanwhile, according to a news item in the New Today of Grenada, female attorney at law Brenda Wadali Beaumont has been disbarred and can no longer practice as a lawyer in Grenada. The decision to ban Wadali Beaumont was announced in court on Tuesday by one of the sitting High Court judges. The final straw came in a court matter filed against the female lawyer by attorney at law Alban John, who was representing a client in a divorce proceedings. He said that Wadali Beaumont, who was representing one of the parties in the divorce, collected money for the other party and did not hand it over. A few years ago, an English judge, Gerhard Walbank, had delivered another judgment against Wadali Beaumont in a local court over a money issue amounting to over 350,000 EC dollars and raised concerns over her continued presence as a lawyer on the island given her conduct. Wadali Beaumont is the only Grenadian attorney at law known to be disbarred from practicing in a local court in the past 40 years. Grenada has a legal body headed by retired High Court Judge Rosalind Wilkinson, currently in the process of reviewing a number of complaints made by members of the public against local lawyers and plan to make recommendations for the disbarment of some of them.
Hubbard's Motor Department Mount Gay and Hubbard's Tire Bay, located at the Building Supplies Compound in Grenada, are reminding the motoring public that another round for licensing and inspection has begun. Just arrived on new shipments of quality furrowed and torque tires to fit all makes and models of vehicles at competitive pricing. Shop early to avoid the hassle of long lines. WhatsApp them on 473-405-5482. Hubbard's, quality service, affordable prices.
I am Eddie Frederick. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean. In the meantime, please continue to log on to CaribbeanPerspective.com for more daily news and more.